The tank was burning. Flames crawled across the steel like some living creature trying to claw its way out. Black smoke rolled into the frozen sky. Bullets slammed against metal from every direction. German machine guns tore through the trees. Men were screaming. Somebody was praying. Somebody else was already dead. And standing in the middle of all of it was a skinny 19-year-old kid from Texas. Snow covered the battlefield near Holtzwihr, France. January 1945. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe. Every breath felt like broken glass inside the lungs. American lines were collapsing. German infantry were pushing through the woods. Tanks were moving closer. The entire position was seconds away from being overrun. Most soldiers were retreating. Audie Murphy stayed. He climbed onto a burning tank destroyer, grabbed a .50 caliber machine gun, and opened fire alone. The flames were inches from his body. The vehicle could explode any second, but he kept shooting. German soldiers dropped into the snow. Some were torn apart before they even understood where the fire was coming from. Others hit the ground and never got back up. Murphy kept firing, kept reloading, kept screaming artillery coordinates into a field radio while bullets ripped through the frozen trees around him. Later, people would call him one of the greatest American war heroes who ever lived. But in that moment, he didn't look like a hero. He looked like a terrified young man trying to stop the world from collapsing. And somehow, he did. Before the war, nobody expected Audie Murphy to become anything. He grew up in deep poverty in Texas. A house full of children. No money. No food. A violent, disappearing father. A mother slowly destroyed by exhaustion and sickness. Murphy spent most of his childhood working, picking cotton, hunting for food, trying to survive. By the time he was old enough to enlist, he barely looked old enough to shave. He was tiny, underweight, too skinny for the military. The Marines rejected him. The Navy rejected him. Even the paratroopers turned him away. They all believed the same thing. He wouldn't survive combat. But in 1942, America needed bodies. And eventually, Audie Murphy found his way into the army. Then Europe swallowed him whole. North Africa, Sicily, Italy, southern France. One battlefield after another. Mud, blood, rain, rotting bodies, broken villages. The war didn't care how old he was. It didn't care how small he looked. It only cared whether he could stay alive. And somehow, he kept surviving. The first time Murphy saw a man die beside him, he froze. A German bullet ripped through the soldier's face so fast, it barely looked real. 1 second the man was breathing. The next second, half his head was gone. Murphy dropped into the dirt. His heart hammering so hard, he thought he might black out. Machine gun fire tore through the vineyard around them. Dirt exploded into the air. Men screamed for medics. Somebody crawled past him holding his stomach together with both hands. That was the moment the war stopped feeling heroic. It became animal survival. You stayed low. You listened. You learned where death was coming from. And Murphy learned fast. Other soldiers panicked under fire. Murphy became quieter, sharper, faster. Not because he wasn't afraid, because fear had already been part of his life long before Europe. He understood something the battlefield teaches very quickly. The difference between living and dying is often measured in seconds, sometimes less. As the war dragged deeper into Europe, Murphy changed. Everyone did. Men stopped talking about home, stopped talking about the future, stopped asking who would survive, because the battlefield answered that question randomly. One day a soldier was smoking beside you. The next day he was lying in the snow with his legs gone. Murphy watched men bleed out in frozen foxholes, watched medics get shot while trying to save wounded soldiers, watched artillery tear bodies apart so violently there was barely enough left to identify. The smell never left. Burned fuel, wet earth, cordite, blood, rotting flesh. It stayed inside your nose, inside your clothes, inside your dreams. By late 1944, winter wrapped itself around Europe like a grave. The cold became another enemy. Boots froze, weapons jammed, fingers cracked and bled. Men slept sitting up because the ground itself felt deadly. Murphy's unit kept shrinking. New replacements arrived terrified and inexperienced. Most didn't last very long. Then came January 26, 1945. Holtzwihr, France. The morning fog hung low over the trees. Visibility was terrible. And then they heard it. Tank engines. Deep. Slow. Heavy. German armor was moving toward them. Moments later, artillery slammed into the American lines. The earth exploded upward. Trees snapped apart. Snow and dirt blasted through the air. Machine guns opened up almost immediately. MG-42 fire ripped through the woods like industrial machinery. The sound alone was enough to terrify people. American soldiers dropped all around Murphy. Some never even fired back. The Germans kept advancing, infantry moving behind armor. Closer, closer, closer. Murphy's position was collapsing. Then an American tank destroyer took a direct hit. Fire erupted from the vehicle. Crew members tried climbing out. One was cut down instantly. Another disappeared inside the flames. The wreck burned violently near the edge of the woods. Most men would run from something like that. Murphy ran toward it. He ordered his men to pull back while he stayed behind to cover them. Alone. He climbed onto the burning vehicle and grabbed the mounted machine gun. Then he opened fire. The .50 caliber roared across the battlefield. German soldiers dropped into the snow. Some were literally torn apart by the heavy rounds. Others scattered into the trees, trying to find cover. Bullets hammered the burning tank destroyer from every direction. Metal screamed. Sparks flew. Flames climbed higher. Murphy stayed on the gun. Smoke burned his eyes. His hands shook from exhaustion and cold. His leg had already been wounded. Still, he kept firing. At the same time, he continued directing American artillery through the radio, calling strikes dangerously close to his own position. The battlefield became chaos. Artillery thundered through the forest. Snow exploded into the air. German soldiers vanished inside clouds of dirt and smoke. Screams echoed between the trees. Murphy later admitted he was terrified. But terror didn't stop him. It trapped him in survival mode. There was no room left for anything else. Eventually, the Germans slowed, then stopped, then began pulling back. Many of them reportedly believed they were facing a much larger American force. In reality, it had mostly been one wounded 19-year-old refusing to break. When the battle finally ended, the forest fell strangely quiet. The burning vehicle still crackled in the snow. Wounded men cried out for medics. Bodies covered the battlefield. American, German, young, broken, frozen. Murphy stood there covered in smoke, mud, and blood. Nobody celebrated. Nobody cheered. The survivors were too exhausted, too numb. Some men sat in the snow, staring at nothing. Others tried lighting cigarettes with shaking hands. Murphy looked down at his own fingers and realized they wouldn't stop trembling. Years later, America would turn Audie Murphy into a symbol. Newspapers loved him. Hollywood loved him. Politicians loved him. He looked perfect for the role. Young, decorated, photogenic, a living war hero. But the real war never truly left him. At night, he woke up drenched in sweat. He heard artillery in his sleep. He relived firefights over and over again. Sometimes he slept with loaded weapons nearby. Sometimes he exploded in anger. Sometimes he isolated himself completely. Today we would call it PTSD. Back then, people barely understood it. They simply looked at him and said, "You're a hero," but heroes still have nightmares. Heroes still break. Murphy once said he fought the way he did because the enemy was killing his friends. Not for glory, not for medals, not for history, for the men beside him. That's the part most war movies miss. Real combat isn't clean. It isn't inspiring. It isn't cinematic when you're actually inside it. It's exhaustion, confusion, mud, fear, cold, screaming, and ordinary human beings trying not to die. Audie Murphy survived the war, but like many soldiers, part of him never truly came home. In 1971, he died in a plane crash at the age of 46. When news spread across America, many veterans went silent. because they understood something civilians often never see. Sometimes a man can survive the battlefield and still spend the rest of his life trapped inside the war. Even now near Holtzwihr, there's a memorial honoring Audie Murphy. And when winter snow falls across those forests again, when the wind moves through the frozen trees, it's not hard to imagine that young soldier still standing there on top of that burning tank destroyer, firing into the darkness, trying to hold the line for just a few seconds longer.